All right, the book of Ruth. We're coming to Ruth chapter 4, which is the final chapter in the book of Ruth. So just a brief reminder, overview for those of you who missed it, maybe the first three chapters or a couple of the three chapters. The book of Ruth stands in contrast to the book of Judges. Because if you go back and look at the book of Judges, what you see is the nation of Israel doing, and matter of fact, it says everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. So the nation of Israel have wandered away from God, and when they wander away from God and they fall into idolatry and they fall into the trap that God said would happen if they didn't eliminate all the peoples that they were going to be living in the midst of, they begin chasing after these other gods and being influenced by their neighbors, and God sends one of the foreign powers, one of the foreign nations, to enslave them or defeat them or punish them, is what God is doing. He's using the nations around the nation of Israel to punish them for their disobedience and for their ungodliness and for the fact that they're chasing after other gods. And then when the nation of Israel realize their situation and they cry out to God for deliverance, the Lord sends a deliverer in the guise of the judges. That's what the book of Judges is about. It's about a series of judges, right? We know about Deborah, and we know about Gideon, we know about we know about Samson, we know about all of these judges that God appoints and brings them up in response to the nation of Israel when they're crying out to God. But the story of the book of Judges, and the book of Judges finishes with this just evil sin, began by the tribe of Benjamin, but there was more participants in it. And that's the way the book of Judges leaves us, that Israel is once again fallen into this pattern of extreme sinfulness and falling away from God and stopping and pausing in their walk or in their followership of God. And then we have the book of Ruth, and we see that this contrast, what is going on between those who follow their own ways and do what is right in their own eyes, and a redeemer who in this case models for us what the ultimate redeemer will do. So the book of Ruth is in large measure a microcosm of what is going on in the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, we see a series of judges, all of them flawed in some way. Now, then we come to the book of Ruth, and we see very starkly that the book of Ruth is a prediction, is a shadow, is a typological telling of what the Messiah will ultimately do, the ultimate Redeemer. So in the book of Ruth, we see nothing, we see no flaws in Boaz. That does not mean that Boaz was sinless. We're just not given any flaws from Boaz. We see in Boaz the ideal picture of a godly man. He reacts to the situation as a godly man. He sees it through as a godly man, and he follows God's direction the entire way. As a matter of fact, as we'll see tonight, he's not just interested in following the letter of the law. Boaz is a man who follows the spirit of the law. And so in that instance, Boaz is modeling for us the Lord Jesus Christ. Ruth is modeling for us the church. Naomi is modeling for us the nation of Israel. So, chapter 1, we see that Elimelech, who was Naomi's husband, Chilion and Mahlon, their children, their two boys, there is a famine in the land of Bethlehem, and they flee to Moab. Moab, if you recall, was the offspring of Lot and his eldest daughter. When his two daughters got him drunk after the episode of Sodom and Gomorrah, because he had led them out into the wilderness and they were not willing to wait to find husbands, and so they got their father drunk and went in and had relations with him, and the offspring of Lot and the oldest daughter was Moab. And Moab, the Moabites, were mortal enemies of the Israelites. If you'll recall, it was the king of Moab who was trying to have Balaam curse the nation of Israel. Remember the story of Balaam and his donkey. It was the king of Moab that had hired Balaam, or attempted to hire Balaam. And Balaam finally tells the king of Moab how to destroy and how to defeat the nation of Israel, and that was by mixing in marriage with them, and introducing them to the false gods and all of this. But that was the king of Moab. The Moabites were deadly enemies of the nation of Israel. So the fact that Elimelech flees with his family is showing us that he is going to do things man's way. He is in the midst of a famine in Bethlehem, and rather than trust in God and trust that God is going to bless them in the land that God has given them and promised blessing, rather than believe in God's promise and rather than follow what God has taught them to do, Elimelech flees with his family to Moab. While there, again, they break God's law, and Elimelech dies, and Naomi takes for her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, two wives, two Moabite wives, in direct disobedience when God tells them not to intermarry with the peoples around them, because if they intermarry with the peoples around them, it's going to cause issues down the road. So she marries her two boys to these two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Then the two boys die, and Naomi is stuck in Moab with these two daughter-in-laws. Now, it's not like our culture today. If you are married to a man and he dies, your mother-in-law no longer has a hold on you. But in those days, they had become her daughters. So they had some responsibility for their mother-in-law in that culture, in that day and age. And this is why we see when Naomi is determined, she hears that the famine is left Bethlehem, and she is determined to go back to Bethlehem and live there, live on charity. Hopefully somebody will take care of her. And so we see that the two daughter-in-laws, initially both of them, they're going to go with her. That is because they still have a responsibility to Naomi. But then you see that Naomi relieves them of their responsibility. She tells them, go back to your family, go back to your gods, which is a horrible thing for an Israelite, a woman, or an Israelite period, to say to somebody, go worship a false god. But that's what Naomi does. She says, you go back and worship your false gods. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem alone. I don't want you with me. Because let's face it, Naomi comes dragging these Moabite women. People are going to look down on her. So she doesn't want that baggage following her back to Bethlehem. And perhaps she doesn't want a able-bodied woman there, because what will happen is exactly what happened, and Ruth goes out and gleans in the field. Otherwise, Naomi could have depended on the charity of those relatives or acquaintances she had in Bethlehem still. But Ruth is bound and determined, because somehow, possibly during their celebration of the Sabbath or remembrance of the Sabbath, or in some of the stories that they told about God, Ruth has become a believer in the God of Israel. And so that's her great declaration. What does Ruth say? No, where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will God. I will die. Where your people will be my people. And the greatest statement that Ruth makes of all, and your God will be my God. I'm going to worship your God. He's the true God, and so that's where I'm going. We see this again in chapter 2. And when Boaz says, they have all that interaction, Ruth has been gleaning all morning in the field, and Boaz comes out and asks his servants, whose woman is this? In other words, who does she belong to? Who is her protector? A young woman in that day and age could not be alone. She must have a husband, a brother, a father, some male protector to protect her from we all know what she was to be protected from. And when they said she doesn't have one, she's the Moabite widow who came back with Naomi, Boaz immediately takes upon himself, and here's where one of the places where Boaz is acting in the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. Boaz was a redeemer. He wasn't the closest redeemer, so it wasn't his responsibility to watch over watch over Ruth. But the spirit of the law tells him that this woman needs watching over, so Boaz determines that he will be her protector, and that's what he does. And then in verse 10, when all of this has happened, Boaz tells her, don't go to anybody else's field. You stay in my field. I've already told them, don't bother you. You stay with my women, my young women, and the young men are not going to hurt you. And she says, why? In verse 10, have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. And here's the key statement. Why didn't Ruth come back? Under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Ruth has sought refuge under the wings of the Lord. She has come to the land of the Lord. She has recognized and come to understand that the God of Israel is the true God, and she comes to take refuge there, and that's why all this blessing has come to her. Then we see in chapter 3, and I know I'm a little long-winded, but some of you weren't here. Chapter 3, we see that Naomi is still trying to act in her humanness. She's still trying to do things mankind's way, because she tells, excuse me, she tells Ruth, this man is a redeemer, and I've got a plan. I want you to get all gussied up, and when he's at the threshing floor, because Ruth has spent the entire harvest season gleaning in Boaz's field. And Naomi says, okay, harvest is coming to a close. He's going to be at the threshing floor. You gussy yourself up, put on the best dress, put on some perfume. I want you to go, and you're going to, in essence, seduce Boaz. And you're going to seduce him, and you're going to say you're a redeemer, and he's going to take you, right? He's going to take you sexually, and he's going to make you his wife, and we're set for life then. Well, Ruth does not want to go that route, although she still has to obey in that culture. She still has to obey Naomi, and Boaz is not going to go that route. So Ruth tweaks it just enough to still be obeying what Naomi has said, but she does so in a manner that keeps her virtue intact, that shows Boaz that she is not coming trying to seduce him, but she is coming requesting his assistance. And so Boaz recognizes that she's a righteous woman. He recognizes what she's doing, and he also acts in a manner that keeps her virtue intact and says, look, there is another who is closer than I, right? We don't know who this other redeemer is. He was a closer relative of Naomi, of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. So he was probably a cousin of Boaz, but regardless, he was a closer relative to the one who lost the land, Elimelech, than Boaz was. So Boaz is bound and determined to obey God's law in this manner, and it was that man's responsibility. That man had the first right of refusal. That man was the one who was actually responsible for redeeming Naomi and Ruth. So that's where we find ourselves in chapter 4. Boaz says, all right, I'm going to settle this matter once and for all. I will see if the near redeemer will redeem you, and if he does not, then I will do so myself. So questions up to chapter 4. Verse 1 of chapter 4. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken, we're never told his name, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who was come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Now, strictly speaking, that is not the requirement that the law lays out. But again, Boaz is wanting to follow the spirit of the law, because the spirit of the law does lay out the reason he is redeeming it is to redeem the name. And the way that you redeem the name of the dead who had no offspring is you, and we see this in the story of Judah what's her name? Judah's daughter-in-law. Her husband died. She didn't have any kids, and he married to her next son. Judah had to give his next son to her. He died, no children. Judah had a smaller child, and he said, okay, when he grows up, I'll give you him in marriage too, because the law said that if my brother died, I have an older brother, and if he was married and he died without any offspring, then it was my responsibility to marry his widow and produce offspring for him. So the offspring that I would produce for him would inherit what he had. So what Boaz is actually saying here is, part of this redemption that you must do is to have a child with Ruth who will be Elimelech's, in this case Mahlon. That was Ruth's husband. This is where we're told who married who. Orpah was married to Chilion and Ruth was married to Mahlon. But the child that Boaz and Ruth would produce would actually inherit Mahlon's inheritance. Right? Does that make sense? So Boaz is saying part of the redemption is you must marry Ruth and you must produce an offspring to perpetuate her dead husband's name, right? The line of Elimelech. So the line of Elimelech would live on in Ruth and Boaz's child. So does that make sense? So when Boaz reminds
Tamar.
that man, who?
It's Tamar, by the way.
Tamar?
Tamar.
Okay, yeah. And then she prostitutes herself for a goat. Yeah. Bible's full of them stories. But thank you for that. All right. Then Boaz, verse 5, said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, we're not told why. Maybe he's got a wife who's not going to appreciate that he's going to bring another wife in. Maybe he does not want to split up his inheritance with his children. For whatever reason, the fact that he is going to have to take Ruth as well as Naomi's land is a game changer for him. It is a game ender for him. He no longer is interested in being the Redeemer. He said, the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off among his brothers, and from the gate of this native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephratah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So they agree that Boaz is now going to act as the kinsman redeemer. He is going to step into that role officially because the nearer kinsman has declined to do so. And so Boaz does so. Verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. Talking about the child. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. And Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. Now if you go look at the genealogies in Matthew and in Luke, you look at the genealogy, you see that the author of Ruth is skipping some generations. It's just to lay out the lineage of David. The purpose there is to show that Boaz and David come from the line of Judah, which is the line that the kings were supposed to come from, which is why we start Samuel. This is the very next book. We're going to be introduced to the judge and prophet Samuel, who will lead us up until David. But it's not a comprehensive genealogy. It's just a proof that David is in the line of Judah and giving an outline of his lineage. So, what do we know about the kinsman redeemer from the book of Ruth? That tells us about Jesus. Kinsman redeemer had to be a family member, right? Have you ever wondered why yourself the major reason Jesus had to put on flesh? Why did God become a man? What'd you say, Cheryl? To redeem the world that Adam lost. The role of the kinsman redeemer was to redeem someone who had found themselves sold into slavery, and to redeem the land that they had lost. What happened in the garden? When Adam sinned, he lost the title deed to planet Earth. Remember, God had given Adam dominion over all of the earth. Adam was the ruler of earth. And when he sinned, he lost that to Satan, which is why Satan is now the ruler of the earth, because Adam lost his land. He also fell into slavery to sin. And every person who has been born from Adam has also been a slave to sin. So Jesus must become our next of kin. Matter of fact, he becomes the closest next of kin to Adam, which is why Paul calls him the second Adam. He becomes a human so that he could be a family member to us, so that he could be humanly connected to each and every person here who is alive. Do you understand that we all come from Adam and Eve? So we are at some point cousins with Jesus, however many times removed. We share the same blood. He is a descendant of Adam. He is a descendant of Noah, just as we all are. And so he is kin to all of us in his humanity. So he checks that box of the kinsman redeemer. He is the closest kin. He's even closer than anybody else to Adam. There are 2 human men who are direct creations of God in all of human history. I am a direct creation of God, but he used Glenn Hyder and Lyndall Smith to create me. He took DNA from both my father and my mother and combined them with the egg and the sperm and created me in my mother's womb. But he did not create me like he created Adam. Adam was a direct creation by a miraculous work of God, by God's very own hands. God formed Adam out of the dust of the earth. God placed Jesus in the womb of Mary. So Jesus, in his humanity, is also a direct creation of God. There was no human father involved. So therefore, he is Adam's brother. He is the next of kin to Adam, the closest kin to Adam, because they share the same father. Does that make sense? So the virgin birth is vitally important because the virgin birth allows Jesus to be the very next of kin to Adam, and it also allows Jesus not to inherit Adam's sin nature because Adam is not Jesus's father. Some level, Adam is all of our fathers because we come from the line of Adam. Jesus comes from the line of Eve in her DNA, in her human body, nurtured him, but God placed that embryo into Mary's womb. So God is his direct father. So he is the next of kin to Adam. Therefore, he qualifies to be the one who redeems what Adam lost. Adam lost the earth, the title deed to planet Earth. Jesus has redeemed the title deed to planet Earth. He hasn't claimed it yet. He's going to claim it at the second coming, but he has redeemed it. And he has redeemed all of us who put our faith and trust in him out of our slavery to sin. So, what was Boaz's motivation for redeeming Ruth? It was not motivated by self-interest. We see in Boaz's interaction with Ruth from chapter 2 on that it is motivated by an interest in her interest. He has her interest at heart. When he first sees her, he calls her his daughter, which means I'm going to protect you. I'm going to treat you like my daughter. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to protect you. I will watch out and do for you because you cannot do for yourself. His interest was not to get something from it. And we see that in his reaction when Ruth asked him to marry her. He said, blessed are you beyond measure, because you could have chased after the young men. You could have chased after the good-looking men. Instead, you're willing to marry this old codger, right? And so Boaz was not motivated by the fact that he didn't see this good-looking young woman in the field. I mean, let's face it, she's been over picking up grain all day in the Middle East. She's not looking her best when Boaz lays his eyes on her. She's been working in the field all day. And I don't know about you, but when you work in the field all day, you don't look pristine. You got a dirty face, dirty hands, and yet Boaz is not looking at her as a future conquest, if you want to put it that way, or as a potential partner. He's not looking at her and saying, woo-hoo, look what a good-looking woman that is. No, he's looking at her out of concern and care for her. It's the same way that Jesus looks at us. He doesn't look at me and say, wow, what a good-looking fellow. I need him on my team. No, he looks at me and feels compassion because I'm in a miserable state. So was Ruth. Ruth was in a miserable state. She's behaving and she's acting and doing the work of the very poor. She's gleaning from a field because she has no other means of supporting herself or Naomi. And so Boaz looks at her out of compassion and love. An agape love. He cares about her well-being. He cares about her as a person, not for the benefit that she can bring him, but because his character is such that he is going to follow the letter, just the letter, but the spirit of the law of God. And the law of God is to, as Jesus says so succinctly when they ask him, what's the most important? You love the Lord their God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, this is Boaz loving his neighbor as much as he loved himself. And so he does this out of love and concern for her. Same reason that Jesus does it for us. The same reason that Jesus redeems us. So Boaz is our example of a kinsman redeemer and what Jesus has done for us. He sees us in our miserable state, and he provides for us, and he protects us, and he redeems us, and makes us his bride. So that's the book of Ruth, and we will start the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Wednesday, next Wednesday. Comments? Questions?